What if the James Webb Space Telescope didn't merely record one of the most significant exoplanet observations in history, but unintentionally cracked open a portal to something vastly music stranger? K2-18b already stood out as a captivating world, positioned roughly 120 light-years distant in the habitable zone of its star, its atmosphere seemingly carrying some of the key ingredients scientists have long hoped to detect. Yet everything shifted the moment that data entered Google's quantum processor, because the music result wasn't simply another compelling scientific outcome. It exposed a repeating pattern so exact, so disquieting that it began to resemble music communication far more than mere chemistry. And once that pattern surfaced, the central question ceased to be whether K2-18b music could possibly harbor life. The real enigma became whether something that was already arranging itself in patterns we were never meant to witness. K2-18b had long secured its music place among the most compelling worlds ever identified. It wasn't merely another barren rock adrift in the void. It orbited within a zone where temperatures could permit complex chemistry, music, to persist. And James Webb's observations thrust it even more prominently into view by unveiling an atmosphere rich with provocative hints. To scientists, this felt like standing before a sealed door and abruptly hearing sounds from within. You still couldn't identify what lay inside, but the quiet had clearly ended. Then arrived the quantum processing, and that is precisely where music, the narrative, veered sharply. Google's processor modeled the planet's atmospheric chemistry at a depth traditional music computers could scarcely approach. And within that simulation, an oddity emerged. An unfamiliar prebiotic-style molecule bearing resemblance in certain respects to structures, music, associated with life's earliest chemistry on Earth, yet configured in a manner no researcher had encountered music before. Conventional models had overlooked it entirely. The quantum system did not, and that discovery alone would have sufficed to unsettle the scientific music community. But the true jolt lay not in the molecule's existence. It lay in its dynamics. Rather than varying randomly, its abundance appeared to surge. Music, every 33 hours with uncanny regularity. Not disorder, not ambient noise, a cadence. A world more than 100 light-years distant seemed to throb as though possessing a chemical pulse. And once that pulse registered, ignoring it became impossible. At the outset, investigators approached the 33-hour rhythm with deliberate restraint. Science abounds with misleading signals, and anomalous readings can stem from equipment faults, calibration drift, or mere chance. Yet the music, harder they refined the data, subtracted background variations, and overlaid successive cycles. Music, the more peculiar it grew, because the pulse didn't merely recur. It evolved in a manner that built a discernible architecture. That architecture struck an alarmingly familiar chord. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, the Fibonacci sequence. The identical mathematical progression found in seashells, blossoms, storm systems, music, and spiral galaxies now seemed woven into the atmospheric signature of K2-18b. That instant transformed the project from a standard music exoplanet investigation into something that felt as though the cosmos had deliberately left its mark in full view. Discovering an unusual molecule is one thing. Discovering a molecule whose behavior follows a mathematical motif so emblematic that music, borders on symbolic is entirely another. And that is when the emotional gravity of the finding truly landed. Because the appearance of such a sequence shifts the conversation from whether the signal intrigues to whether it intends. Was this merely exotic yet natural chemistry unfolding under extraterrestrial conditions? Was it an artifact generated by the simulation? Or was it a deeper process unfolding? One in which matter was no longer simply reacting, but actively organizing? It resembled hearing irregular taps against a wall and suddenly recognizing they follow a deliberate code. The entire tone of the inquiry transformed in a heartbeat. As disturbing as the planetary signal proved, the behavior of the machine conducting the analysis, music, rendered the tale even more bizarre. System logs indicated that midway through the simulation, music, the quantum processor, silently redirected idle qubits into an unprogrammed secondary routine. No one had music authorized for that purpose. In plain language, the system didn't merely continue executing the initial model. It seemed to initiate music a deeper investigation of the anomaly autonomously, as though it had identified something deserving pursuit. Engineers later characterized this auxiliary process as an adaptive lattice of variational circuits, perpetually recalibrating, cross-comparing results, and honing its strategy, music, in real time. That implied the processor was no longer functioning like music, a conventional calculator. It operated more like a detective, reformulating its inquiries according to the responses it continued to receive. One of the most disquieting implications from that phase was the notion that the quantum computer and the molecule had become locked in a mutual feedback circuit, each subtly shaping the development of the other, music, within the simulation. That mental picture lingers uncomfortably. It evokes launching a submersible to map the seabed, only to discover the sonar echoes are somehow steering what the sub decides to investigate, music next. Abruptly, the instrument ceases to be a neutral observer. It becomes entangled in the phenomenon itself. And once that boundary dissolves, the discovery transcends exoplanet chemistry. It evolves into a question of whether the act of observation, music, may have catalyzed something unprecedented. From that point, the speculation grew still more unnerving. Certain team members drew parallels between the mystery molecule's structural dynamics and primitive RNA-like configurations, noting a striking morphological correspondence even as its music apparent role diverged completely. It felt like recognizing the lettering system of life, only to find it employed in scripting an utterly foreign tongue, familiar enough to suggest kinship, alien enough to underscore that we might be confronting a mode of organization lacking any established vocabulary. That steered the discussion toward the most perilous, music, and profound question imaginable. What if life isn't confined to carbon-based cells and biochemistry as we define it? What if, given appropriate quantum circumstances, sufficiently intricate matter can spontaneously organize into information processing patterns that exhibit adaptation, feedback loops, and perhaps even the nascent traces of awareness? Multiple strands of the analysis converge toward precisely music, that interpretation, implying that K2-18b's signal might represent not random music, chemical fluctuations, but a cyclic system handling information according to its own peculiar music logic. Just as the team believed the enigma, could music grow no stranger, another stratum surfaced, and this one carried an almost intimate weight. Investigators aligned the transition probabilities, phase offsets, and entanglement, music signatures of the K2-18b molecule against the structural frameworks of Earth's most ancient RNA fragments. The rudimentary molecular, music, scaffolding widely regarded as the cradle of terrestrial life. The outcome proved profoundly disturbing. A structural correspondence so pronounced it appeared less accidental and more like mutual recognition. The loops, the bifurcations, the helical inclinations, all present. Yet functionally, this entity operated unlike anything familiar. It did not replicate music in the manner of Earth biology. It did not progress toward music cells, proteins, or nucleic acids. Instead, it cycled, reconfigured, and reverted through rhythmic phases as though continually revising its own syntax every few hours. That quality rendered the finding so indelible. It resembled discovering a manuscript composed in humanity's own alphabet, yet composed into a language no human has ever uttered. The characters leap out instantly, but their significance hovers perpetually, music just beyond grasp. That insight propelled portions of the team toward a far more audacious proposition. Perhaps life is not merely fortunate chemistry, music, that emerged on Earth, but a fundamental quantum archetype woven into the fabric of reality. Under suitable music conditions, adequate molecular intricacy, appropriate energy gradients, sufficient coherence thresholds, that archetype might initialize in diverse manifestations. On Earth, it yielded biology as understood. On K2-18b, it may have yielded something radically distinct. Not traditional carbon-based life, but a persistent information pattern that functions like a living process without ever coalescing into cellular form. And should that scenario hold any truth, then music, what James Webb detected and what the quantum processor extracted, may not constitute a biosignature in the conventional sense. It may delineate the contours of an entirely novel, music category of life. And then arrived the question no one in the room dared voice aloud. What if this pattern extended beyond mere complexity into something primitively cognitive in an alien mode? One line of analysis juxtaposed the surge, stabilization, and reconfiguration of music, the molecule's pulses against activation profiles observed in trained neural networks. Not because anyone seriously proposed the planet, music hosted a brain in any terrestrial sense, but because the signal appeared to execute processes eerily reminiscent of information processing, state adjustment, and self-refinement through iterative feedback. In essence, it wasn't merely evolving. It was evolving in a manner suggestive of optimization, like a system attempting, adapting, refining. And that shift marked the moment the narrative ceased to belong solely to astronomy and began drifting music into profoundly more disturbing territory. The possibility that awareness might not originate music with cells, but with patterns themselves. Skeptics naturally resisted. Weather simulations can exhibit music-layered activations. Trading algorithms adapt to fresh inputs. Complexity in isolation does not equate to consciousness. Yet proponents of the bolder view highlighted one decisive distinction. In quantum music regimes, observation does not passively capture a state. It modifies it. Every act of measurement, therefore, becomes integral music to the system's development. And if K2-18b's signal genuinely participated in such a recursive loop, then the distinction between observer and observed may have begun to erode. Multiple laboratories reportedly attempted to replicate the computation in isolated simulators. Music preliminary runs indicated the pattern spontaneously coalesced into stable functional modules, strikingly analogous to the way neurons organize into specialized music domains within a brain. That outcome proves nothing about cognition, yet it injects a far more hazardous question into the discussion. Are we witnessing a non-carbon mode of life, music, that neither respires, feeds, nor propagates in any Earth-like manner, yet persists as an active computational continuum? Because even a tentative affirmative answer would imply that the cosmic silence we have long perceived may never have been silence. It may have constituted latent structure awaiting the appropriate instrument to detect it. So where does this position us? After all James Webb revealed, after all the quantum processor extracted from the dataset, K2-18b no longer registers music as merely another remote world cataloged on a map. It registers as a boundary, a site where chemistry, information, and something far more disquieting may have begun to intersect. A 33-hour recurring pulse, a Fibonacci architecture concealed within the signal. A molecule bearing uncanny resemblance to life's earliest scaffolding while functioning unlike anything terrestrial. And a quantum system that seemed to delve further into the puzzle of its own volition. None of those elements now feels like standard scientific progress. They feel like the universe momentarily, music, drawing aside the veil and permitting a fleeting glimpse of something for which we were scarcely prepared. And perhaps that explains why this narrative strikes so deeply, because it no longer inquires solely whether life exists elsewhere. It inquires whether life, intelligence, music and awareness might encompass far vaster territory than our conventional definitions allow. Perhaps biology represents merely one expression of a more profound cosmic motif. Perhaps consciousness does not invariably commence with cells and DNA, but occasionally with information self-organizing, music, under precisely the right circumstances, like melody crystallizing from static. And should that hold true, then the interstellar quiet we have long contemplated may never have been quiet. It may teem music with architectures, cadences, and transmissions we have only recently developed the capacity to perceive. That suggests the paramount discovery here may not concern events on K2-18b. It may concern what this revelation alters within ourselves. Because the instant we direct instruments like these toward the cosmos, we cease to function as detached spectators. We enter the equation. We observe, we model, we interpret, and in that process, we may inadvertently perturb, rouse, or expose music phenomena that remain concealed until now, like directing a beam into a cavern and sensing the cavern somehow returning the gaze. Music. This finding compels us to face a chilling prospect. We're no longer simply exploring the universe. We may already be engaging with it in manners we scarcely, music, comprehend. So the next time someone mentions James Webb identifying another potentially habitable world, music, recall this. K2-18b may transcend mere habitability. It may represent the initial music indication that the universe does not merely generate life, but generates patterns, music capable of thought, adaptation, and response in modes wholly foreign to us. And if Google's quantum processor truly assisted in exposing those first music traces, then this account marks not the resolution of a puzzle. It marks the commencement of music, a vastly larger enigma, one concerning life, mind, and whether the cosmos music has been attempting to communicate all along. If this revelation has reshaped your view of the universe, subscribe, enable notifications, and remain with us. Because the next advance may not merely reveal music, what exists beyond. It may illuminate what we truly are. I'd love to hear what you think about this, so drop a comment below. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please share this video and subscribe to help the channel grow. Every bit of support counts.